Welcome to Football Today Team Profiles and Projections. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner, here with my co-host, Justin Penik. And today we are looking at the New York Jets, who came in at our power rankings at 12th. They went 7-10 last year. Offensively, it was awful, right? Aaron Rodgers, was injured on the first drive of the game. They were 32nd in EPA per play, 29th in points. Defensively, they were 12th in scoring for defense, but they were so much better than that. Third in EPA per play. And we'll go through all of it. It's Robert Saleh's fourth year. Nathaniel Hackett's second year as OC. Jeff Ulbrich's fourth year after being the Falcons DC. This team won 7 games despite the fact that their season ended on the first drive of the year. They've been third in EPA per play the last 2 years in defense. Number one in success rate, but both seasons left at 7 wins due to just mostly awful quarterback play. There's a lot of factors on what that happened, why they struggled offensively, right? It's not all quarterback play, but it is largely their failures have been because of quarterback play. If they even had average quarterback play, they're a team that's, probably in the playoffs or close to it the last 2 seasons.
I mean, Jets won 7 games last year.
And the year before.
7. They're the face of offensive ineptitude in the NFL over the last half decade, Bobby, basically since Ryan Fitzpatrick was there in 2015. I feel like they're the face of it. They were 32nd in offensive EPA per play last year, 32nd in EPA per dropback, 29th in EPA per rush, and they were last in third downs and last in the red zone. They won 7 games last year. And we do this thing with NFL teams all the time too, right? We even do it with our favorite team and the other team that plays in New York and New Jersey, where they won 6 games. And look at how much went wrong. Talk about how bad they were, but then end the sentence with, but they still won X games. We do this with a good amount of teams. But the Jets were so injured last year, and they are so Rodgers dependent that I think the Jets are the one team where it is totally, totally acceptable to have that kind of talking point on them.
Well, they were the worst passing unit in the NFL last year, in my opinion. The worst. And I don't think there's other teams that had stretches that matched what the Jets went through, but the Jets just all year, outside of a couple games where people got a little bit excited about Zach Wilson, like the Chiefs game or even week 1, despite he didn't play well in that game, got excited about him. But here's why I'm not so stressed about the Jets jetting in a sense, where it's 2 things go wrong, now the season's over, is I think this team spent the offseason addressing weaknesses, but also protecting itself.
Yes.
Right? There's 2 major moves they did that I thought were really smart, even though if everyone stays healthy, they don't help you get to the Super Bowl at all. Right? So you would look at a team that has such a short Super Bowl window and you say, oh, you drafted a backup in the first round and this deal wasn't that big of a deal, but signing Tyrod Taylor. But those to me are 2 of their most important deals, was drafting Olu Fashanu in the first round.
Yep.
After knowing Tyron Smith deals with injuries every year, and then bringing in Tyrod Taylor to give him a depth of spots where they had none in 2023.
Yeah, I agree, man. We'll get it to maybe when we talk about the the Jets draft class, but I know they weren't in a position to draft Rome Odunze. I like for the New York Jets.
They were a team that everyone's kind of paired Brock Bowers with. Yeah. They felt like a team that everyone was just saying.
Maybe Rome would have helped them more in year 1, but maybe outside of Rome, I love drafting Olu for the Jets because of the insurance of that is your Tyron Smith insurance. Where Tyron Smith, he may or may not be my X factor heading into this year. Spoiler alert when we get to that segment, but they did the things this year, protecting themselves on the offensive line to a point. I mean, they were the most hurt offensive line in the league last year. It's crazy. When I say struggling with injuries, it's not.
And they weren't in a great place going into the year either.
Right. And they needed everybody to stay healthy last year, and they did not stay healthy. So I love the Olu insurance. And then, of course, if Aaron Rodgers goes down for a large extended period of time, then, of course, the season's over. But even if he goes down for a couple weeks, Tyrod Taylor is a quarterback that will help you play 500 football, if not better.
Oh, if say Aaron Rodgers missed the entire year, I still think Tyrod has a good chance of bringing this team to the playoffs.
Yeah, winning 9 games.
They're just not Super Bowl contenders the way they are with Aaron Rodgers. Right. But like you said, it's about protecting yourself that if Rodgers misses a handful of games, you're set there. But also just not having the team. So week we criticize heavily. Like, why was Zach Wilson the backup plan last year? Like, they had this delusion that, oh, if he just spends a year with Rodgers, he's going to turn. And it's like, no, this is delusional. This is not preparing for the season. This is living in kind of la la land, and I think they were, and it bit them. But to go sign those stuff, but let's talk about. But they've been such a great defense these last couple of years, and I'm excited to talk about the defense. But we'll talk about the offense as always, like we do in the beginning. And starting with the pass, I mean, this was the worst passing offense in the NFL last season. Like you mentioned, 30th in yards, 31st in yards per attempt, 32nd in EPA per play, 28th in sacks. It's going to be interesting to see how this offense is run, because there's another move that I don't like that the Jets have done, and that's keeping Nathaniel Hackett as. There's two moves this offseason I didn't like. It was keeping Nathaniel Hackett as the offensive coordinator, and then signing Mike Williams. With the Hackett one, I just don't think he's that good of an offensive coordinator, and I understand it's Aaron Rodgers' show, but I also think like he lowers what you're getting out of Tyrod Taylor if he's in, and I just don't think he's the advantage that people thought he was when he was in Green Bay. Because we've seen that's the LaFleur. Like, they don't run any play action. Like, they should have been so play action heavy the last two, like these
especially
last year.
Get Wilson out in space. And
yeah,
shit
they were
like
31st of 45 in play action rate in 2023, and to me, that's more of. And Denver, Russell Wilson was 31st of 41 in 2022. And that's
another guy whose play action should be
and it's
higher.
not like, because Aaron Rodgers doesn't love play action or a ton of motion, right? Some of these veteran, they kind of like guys in their place. That way they can direct things at the line.
But here's the rebuttal: when Aaron Rodgers bought into that with Matt LaFleur, that's when you saw back-to-back MVP seasons.
They were 14th and 21st in play action rate with LaFleur and Hackett. So it's not just that he built an offense for Aaron Rodgers and it's there. So I think it's more of a Hackett thing than it is, he's building an offense for Aaron Rodgers, because you saw it with Russell Wilson last
I think
year.
it's an Aaron Rodgers thing, where the New York Jets are living and dying by Aaron Rodgers, and they're living and dying by what he wants. This is the Aaron
But I think it's less
Rodgers
of a Rodgers thing, though.
show. No, but
because they didn't do it with Zach Wilson or Russell. He hasn't done it with Zach Wilson or Russell Wilson in the last 2 years.
But my point is that why Hackett is a necessary evil for the New York Jets, and I agree with you. Like, hey, if you remove Aaron Rodgers from the situation, everybody else's ceiling is severely capped and limited by Nathaniel Hackett if you remove Aaron Rodgers from everything.
Right.
But it took Aaron Rodgers 2 years to fully trust what Matt LaFleur was doing. We were talking. I was a person, didn't have an NFL show at the time, but I was a person that is saying Aaron Rodgers is done and washed, especially in those big games. And then once he fully trusted Matt LaFleur, LaFleur's like, dude, you got to trust what I'm trying to do here. It's going to work if you trust it. You're just that good. You're naturally that talented, where if you allow this stuff that's a little different, like the motion, like the play action, it will work. And then lo and behold, you saw those back-to-back MVP seasons happen and unfold. So clearly, Rodgers wants to do things his way, but I don't blame him for that. But are we going to see the Rodgers that was the MVP season, the back-to-back MVP seasons, or are we going to see the Rodgers kind of what we saw in 2022, or even a little bit before that? But let me just add, Bobby.
But even before that, or 2022 is good, really good quarterback
That will be
play.
the best Jets season ever in franchise history. And that will be enough for them to win 10-plus games if Aaron Rodgers is an average NFL quarterback.
And Rodgers has said it when people have talked about his, quote unquote down years, is my down years are other people's our career years.
Aaron Rodgers' down years is the Jets' best season for a quarterback ever.
Yeah, and I think he's gonna look good. Right now he has, this receiving group. This is where I get a little worried. You have Garrett Wilson, obviously, right? 95 catches, 1,000 yards.
Stud.
He's gonna be. He's probably gonna go up to like that 1,300-yard receiver mark. Especially with the other receiving weapons that they have.
And I'll give you a Garrett Wilson stack. He's posted back-to-back 1,000-yard season in his first 2 years. There are only 12 players in NFL history to start their careers with back-to-back seasons of 1,040-plus receiving yards. Zach Wilson is one of his 12 quarterbacks. So Zach Wilson, Mike White. Zach Wilson, Mike White, Joe Flacco, Trevor Siemian, and Tim Boyle. And also you have Chris Streveler in there. Those are the quarterbacks that were throwing him the ball.
Yeah, so it's like it's not even worth like talking about much how good he is, because he's someone who wins at all three levels, adds a yak threat. He's so good at the release, where that's like the biggest thing for Rodgers. Like win quickly for me, and then be a ball winner, because Rodgers will give you opportunities to be a ball winner, and Garrett Wilson does both of those things. So he's I think he's going to go from the 1,000-yard benchmark to like one of the 1,300-yard receivers this year, which I only think 6 guys did that last year. I think Garrett Wilson is going to get into that. And there's clear that there's just such an effort for those 2 guys to be on the same page and the offense to run through those 2 guys. This is where the offense gets a little murky. You know, they added Mike Williams to be their wide receiver too, who I like Mike Williams, but the reason I just think they should have used that money elsewhere because of the injury history. I just think that's if he stays healthy, sick, but it's just not a great bet to make.
Yeah, over the past 3 seasons, the Chargers averaged plus .77 EPA per play with Williams on the field, and the only wide receiver with a higher EPA per play with as many plays as Mike Williams over that span is Brandon Ayuk. So Mike Williams on the field, contested catch guy, is going to challenge him, is going to challenge people deep, but he's got to be on the field, and that's a lot of people on this Jets.
He's had season-ending injuries the last 2 years. So that's the worry with him, right? Started camp on the PUP list and then recently came off of it. Now, this is where Allen Lazard, because say Mike Williams does get hurt, Allen Lazard is now a starting receiver for them. He was so awful last year, right? And that's where I like this offseason so much better for the Jets than last offseason. When that was clearly a Rodgers signing. I was like, this is a waste of money. Like this is a bad signing. And he had the drops. He couldn't get open. He was just a really bad receiver last year, and he had his production cut in half. But here's the thing: is he does work fairly well with Rodgers.
Yeah.
Right. And we even spent the day at Jets practice. We read reports of practice, and it's like Lazard's having a great camp. We were there the one day that Rodgers didn't practice, and Emmanuel Forbes was locking him up. He was like one of the worst starting corners in the NFL for the Commanders. So it's crazy how much it'd be one thing if he has better production with a better quarterback. No shit. But he goes from like a serviceable wide receiver to like just shouldn't be on an NFL field when it's with Rodgers and without Rodgers. So that's like the saving grace is that even if Mike Williams is hurt, Lazard has worked well with Rodgers in the past. He hasn't been a 1,000-yard receiver or anything, but he's been solid enough.
Yeah.
And then slot is a huge question. Like Xavier Gibson is probably the starter, but they're going to want to get Malachi Corley in there. I'm not convinced Corley is going to get a lot of playing time year one. And when he does get playing time, I think it's going to be a lot of manufactured stuff like it was in college. This is my X factor is Xavier Gibson.
Nice.
Because I do think the slot is so important for Aaron Rodgers and the trust level that is needed from Rodgers for that slot wide receiver that I don't think Corley can do that year one. I just don't think he's going to be that his first year. I think Xavier Gibson is huge for just the health of this offense. This offense is obviously going to be better with Aaron Rodgers, but how we can look at it is at a top 5 to 10 offense in the NFL is how is that relationship between Gibson and Rodgers.
Yeah, and Rodgers has never been known to use tight ends. Tyler Conklin's
a good option there, but he's not going to give you a ton of receiving yards.
No. Jeremy Ruckert's a guy that they drafted a couple years ago in the 3rd round. So the tight ends, Rodgers has never really gone to them as like.
Conklin's a good blocker. Like Conklin's a great fit for an Aaron Rodgers offense.
Yeah, sure. But here's the guy that I think should be relied upon so much this year.
Breece Hall.
Like I think if there is an emphasis on wanting to keep Aaron Rodgers healthy, keep Aaron Rodgers off his feet a little bit, it is second-year Breece Hall coming off the ACL. He was 6th in rushing yards over expected per attempt in the NFL last year, averaged 4.5 yards per attempt. And I understand there were a lot of negative plays in there. Like if you look at the plays
he spends time behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and the next gen player tracking data backs that up too, where he's top in the league and spending time behind the line of scrimmage. So maybe that's a little bit of a priority that I'm hoping the coaching staff tried to instill in him this year. Is hey, let's get more north and south faster. But you can't ignore that the Jets' offensive line has been
it was awful.
Horrible.
It didn't set him up for a good situation.
No, and there's no passing game, so of course you're stacking the box, or teams aren't expecting there to be any semblance of a passing game, so it's easier to play the run and stop the run. So Breece Hall should be a guy with Rodgers back. You have Garrett Wilson on the outside. You have the threat of a passing game, an explosive passing game. Breece Hall should be a guy that I'm expecting him, like his rookie year before he tore his ACL, I am expecting Breece Hall to average over 5 yards per carry this
Oh,
year.
he's phenomenal. Like the fact, like to average 4.5 yards per carry, but also be 47th out of 48 in success rate is insane. And that like usually when you see the success, like those guys are averaging 3.9 and 4.0 yards per carry, like to average that a 4.5 is really good when you're getting that type of volume, and then to be that like it does speak. There are issues, and Saul has even said it before. Like he does need to get a little more north-south at times, but when you're behind that offensive line last year, it was just really tough for him, and he wanted to make plays. And he's really the only guy that made plays from them outside of Garrett Wilson, 6 yards away from 1,000 on the ground. So again, I think that's more of it is like part of an issue with Hall, but I think that's more of an O-line issue than it was with him.
I agree with that.
But he also what Hackett did last year was I don't know if he'll get the same volume, but I think there'll be more health for him as a receiver. Right, where he had the most targets for running backs last year with 90, and led them in yards with 591. So I would expect those like total numbers to come down, but I just think it'll be healthy, where Rodgers is getting the ball to the running back at the right times and not just out of necessity because, Hackett had no faith, and rightfully so, in Zach Wilson, where it was like, hey, Garrett Wilson to check down, basically. But he's obviously a great two-way back, and like you said, I think he'll be – maybe he already is, but he should be in the conversation for like one of the best backs in the NFL at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think he should be. It's just a matter of I want Rodgers to almost have less on his plate this year and put it on Breece Hall. You drafted this guy in the first round for a reason. You invested in this offensive line for a reason. I think this can be a team, especially with the offensive line this year, this can be a team that, you don't want to know what, we are going to run the damn ball this year. And I think they should kind of embrace that a little bit.
And they just truly improved an offensive line in an offseason, right? Where last year was and part of that was injuries to current guys. But you look at starting fives, and man, that's about as good as any unit there is. You have Tyron Smith at left tackle. You have Joe Tippmann at center. That's probably their biggest question mark. And then you have Elijah Vera Tucker and Simpson at the guards, and then Morgan Moses at right tackle with Olu being a backup. Again, Tippmann's a question mark, but he didn't have this awful rookie. Like, he had a pretty decent rookie year. That's about as good as a 5 as you can get. And the most injury-prone of those guys, outside of Vera Tucker, is Tyron Smith, and you got that insurance and Olu Fashanu in the draft. So it's like they turned a weakness and turned it into a strength.
Yeah, and you're also allowing AVT to play at one spot now, where hopefully you won't need to
you don't need to move out the tackle if you didn't draft Olu and Tyron Smith gets injured, they probably slide AVT out there.
Yeah,
which he's done well when he's at tackle, but he just needs to play.
Right.
I hope AVT can. One, he's one of my favorite players in the NFL.
Yeah, he's really freaking good,
and he's so good. But he's had these season-ending injuries that have screwed him out of his last 2 years of football.
Yeah.
Where he was legitimately like a great guard and a really good tackle when he was asked to do it on a whim, and he's had these season-ending injuries the last 2 years. So obviously, for the Jets' sake and for his sake, I hope he stays healthy. And then you have Simpson and Moses coming over from the Ravens. Like, those are two solid starters. And then Tippmann. Basically, Tippmann, just get the snaps down.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. We saw it at camp, and we heard some reports about it that they're having issues snapping the fucking ball. And that'll you're getting Rodgers' doghouse quick if you keep messing that up. But like they turn this. This is why I'm so excited about the Jets, despite the fact like we haven't even talked about their defense.
No.
And what part of this? What have we talked about negatively? Nathaniel Hackett, despite the fact that we know Aaron Rodgers is going to run the show, and if Rodgers is done, their Super Bowl hopes are done anyways, and that their wide receiver 2 is injury prone, and the backup isn't good, but he's pretty good. He's decent when he has Aaron Rodgers. Like those are like basically my only 2 gripes. Because we're going to talk about the defense, and it's phenomenal at every single level. Coaching, players, every single level.
I do think they're going to make a move for Devontae Adams anyway.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm actually watching the receiver show right now, and I'm like, okay, yeah, put this dude back with fucking Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, like he wants that to happen. I think that will happen at one point this year.
Yeah, once the Raiders realize Raiders can't punt the season before it starts,
right.
But once it starts, I think they'll realize they need to punt a little bit.
All right, let's move on to the defense. Where I'm gonna start you off with the defense here, Bobby.
Well, I want to ask you, where do you think it's ranked in the NFL?
Now, they did lose a little bit, man.
A little bit.
And the Hassan Reddick situation is up in the air. We're not going to talk
Can
about it too much.
we assume that Reddick is going to play? Because even though
got to.
It doesn't make sense.
I don't want to spend too much time talking about it because by the time this comes out, it could be all resolved.
But I'm under the assumption that Reddick will be there eventually, and the Jets are not trading it. If I thought the Jets might trade him, I'd be a little more worried.
They're not trading him.
They're not going to trade him. So
that means he is going
at some
to
point he has to play and not turn down millions upon millions of dollars.
No, he's also being fined hundreds of thousands of dollars at this point.
But I'm saying once you start losing game checks, that's when I'm surprised it went this long. But anyways,
all right. Listen, I think the Browns have a better defense.
That's it for me.
And that's all the teams on the top of my head. But I'm gonna.
Because the Ravens were better last year, but they lost too many guys. They lost Mike McDonald.
Yep,
they're my number 2 defense in the NFL. And I think it's close. I think you could flip flop with Cleveland.
This is a team that is built for the playoffs because of the defense that they have. They stop elite quarterbacks. Even the Browns last year, Bobby. There was a certain point where the Browns were allowing a good amount of points to some guys and some cats. The Jets stop elite quarterbacks, and they've done that the last 2 years. Like some of the Jets' wins, they're not fluky. They stopped Josh Allen. They really had a great game against Patrick Mahomes last year. They kicked the crap out of Jalen Hurts. I'm probably forgetting some. Didn't they beat the Bengals last year?
Maybe.
Moral of the story, pass rush wins Super Bowls. You talk about this all the time. The Jets, if they get into the postseason, they are going to be a team, regardless of what the offense is, regardless even if you have Tyrod Taylor or quarterback. They are not going to be a team that you want to play because of that defense. And if they have a pass rush that is as productive as it has been the last 2 years, they are going to be a very, very dangerous postseason team because pass rush is, hey, it may not get you to the playoffs. It may not get you to a position, maybe better coverage and not allowing big plays during the regular season. Maybe that's more important during the regular season. But I am with you in your talking point that pass rush is premium, and it's what separates those good teams from great teams in the postseason.
Okay, but even if you want to argue secondary is better, we did our position group rankings on a show about a month ago.
Yeah, their secondary is really good too.
For the front, I ranked them second in the NFL. For their linebackers, I ranked them second in the NFL, and for their secondary, I ranked them first in the NFL. So
maybe they have a safety question.
They're great on all 3 levels.
Yeah,
right. And I don't think their safety like Tony Adams played a ton for them last year, and Chuck Clark is no slouch. I understand they lost Whitehead, but like their front, where it starts, right? They have arguably the best pass rush in the NFL last year, and added a better player in Hassan Reddick. We'll talk about like that, but you have a top 3 defensive tackle in Quinnen Williams, right? I think there's an argument between him and Dexter Lawrence for a second. As much as I'm a Giants fan, I probably would go Quinnen Williams just because, even though I think Dex is better on a down and down basis, Quinnen Williams consistently finishes at the quarterback the way Dexter Lawrence doesn't. But he was 3rd in sacks, hits, and pressures last year after Aaron Donald and Chris Jones. Chris Jones is my number 1. 3rd in win rate. He has 30.5 sacks and 40 tackles for loss for the last 4 seasons. Like he is the main piece of this defense, right? Like Sauce Gardner's great. There's a lot of good pieces on this, but to me, he is the motor that makes this defense go because of how great of a two-way player he is in the middle and how much attention he gets and how much it lets those guys on the edge get those one-on-ones. Like I think he is the motor of this defense is Quinnen Williams.
Yeah, I mean up and down, man. Overall, some more advanced stuff. They had the 3rd lowest average depth of target, 2nd lowest blitz rate. And even with the 2nd lowest blitz rate, they were 4th in pressure rate.
Yeah.
They were 6th in sack rate. They had the 10th. They were 10th in QB hits, and they were 5th in interception rate as well. And I don't. The pass rush is a conversation to have. It is.
Well, let's talk about it.
Let's presume that even with Hassan Reddick in the lineup, let's talk about it.
So you lost John Franklin Myers and Bryce Huff, and you replaced them with Hassan Reddick. You lost Carl Lawson too, but only played 2 games last year. So you're replacing. So I'm going to combine JFM and Bryce Huff's stats with Hassan Reddick's, or compare. JFF and Bryce Huff 13 sacks, Hassan Reddick 13 sacks, and this is Hassan Reddick's not his best year last year. His best year is the year before. 24 QB hits between JFM and Huff, 13 for Hassan Reddick. 80 pressures between those 2 guys, 41 pressures for Reddick, and he's obviously doing this on essentially 150 less snaps in the season. So obviously those 2 are going to put together more production, but it's 2 players. So now you have Reddick, who becomes the best edge rusher that they've had on this group. And it allows Jermaine Johnson, who had a really nice year too, to have a bigger role.
Yeah.
And then the key really is just Will McDonald, because he had good metrics and flashed a bit last year, but he only played 60% of the snaps. The key for this rush continuing to be dominant on the edge, we know it's going to be great with Quentin Williams. Ken Law is a fun add there too.
Yeah.
He's not great, but he can give you a snap, some plays here or there. The key is just Will McDonald taking it. I mean, he's a first-round pick, and he was an older first-round pick. Like, I think they have to have big expectations for him.
Yeah. No, they have to for sure. But I lean a little bit more towards Jermaine Johnson having the true year 3.
Oh, he's their number 2
breakout.
It's Reddick, Jermaine Johnson, and then you need Will McDonald to be that third guy.
Yeah, and I want Jermaine to continue to use his strength, and I think something that made him unique out of Florida State is that he had that strength and he has a multitude of moves. He's not a guy that's solely relying on speed. I think he can beat you and he can maybe catch you by surprise if you're sleeping at the wheel. But I want him to bring the pop, and I want him to be stronger and utilize that bull rush this year. So I think he can do it. So while McDonald, I think they're going to continue to bring him along at whatever pace that he's ready for. I look at like Jermaine Johnson as, hey, you got to be like that legit number 2.
Oh, yeah. That's like the biggest question for this defense. And now that they lost those two guys, one, Hassan Reddick fucking show up and be the same guy you are, and then Jermaine Johnson being like one of the best number 2 and not just a part of a rotation.
Right. But there is a worry. I even have a worry, and there's no way to quantify this. There's no way to really analyze it or respond to it like maybe on your end. But I do have a concern of Hassan Reddick missing camp and Hassan Reddick, having this complicated relationship with the Jets right now, where, he's going to show up whenever he's going to show up. We're recording this August 15th. He's going to show up whenever he's going to show up, and he's not going to have the same summer. And, while the Jets do have a very easy schedule through the first 5 weeks of the season outside of week 1 against the 49ers, who could be without some key players, I'm worried about his overall, what that stat line and what his impact is going to be, because I don't blink at missing the summer. Oh, it's not a big deal. I view it as a big deal. So I'm wondering what he's going to be like when he comes back.
Yeah, I don't stress that as much as you. The only thing is, like, if he comes back right before week 1, you have to limit some of his snaps. But again, they're a team that's lived off of rotation, so you can live with that early on.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's picking them to win week 1 versus the 49ers, but you mentioned the schedule gets really easy after that.
Yeah.
Their linebacker room, I mean, it's set up perfectly. I think it's helped out by the guys in front of them, but you have C.J. Mosley, who's just the ultimate Mike linebacker running the show, and then you have Quincy Williams, who just plays fast as fuck and gets tackles for a loss. 27 tackles for a loss the last 2 seasons. And Jeff Ulbrich, I think, is a great coach of linebackers. Even Sherwood, they like a good bit there, but it's perfectly set up to have that defensive front. You have C.J. Mosley, who's great at directing traffic and getting guys in the right spot. And then you have Quincy Williams, who just plays with his hair on fire and fast and physical and makes plays.
Best linebacker duo in the NFL, and then I think it's even arguable that they have the best cornerback duo in the NFL.
So they're my number 2 linebacker duo in the NFL. Coverage, my cornerback group, or just a whole secondary, I think it's the best in the NFL. Right? Like, they were second in total passing yards per game last year, third in drop pass success rate, 17 interceptions. I mean, it leads off with Sauce Gardner, obviously, who's one of to me, probably the second best cornerbacks in the game, or probably the second best corner after Jalen Johnson. But it's still super. Like, you can debate that both ways. Hit the ground. Like, Sauce Gardner over 2 years has allowed 50% completion percentage and 612 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Didn't we say at one point that if you were to combine the catches and the yards that he's allowed through his first 2
years, he would be a cornerback
years,
1.
Through his first 2 years, that it would match some cornerback 1s that we see
like
in the NFL?
good cornerback 1s.
Yeah.
Like, it would look like, oh, this is better than what A.J. Terrell did last year. Like, it's nuts what and that's, again, his first 2 years. So even, like I said, I have Jalen Johnson ahead of him. There's no reason for Sauce Gardner to not surpass that. I know people, like, get oh, he grabs and shit, but play the way you can get away with, and he gets away with it because of the physicality and how good he is at it.
Yeah.
And I thought that showed up. He was my number 1 player in that draft, and it obviously showed up. And then, you have DJ Reed on the outside and then Michael Carter in the nickel. Like, last year, their DB that gave up the most yards was DJ Reed, and he gave up 31 yards per game. like their again the DB who gave up their not just DB the player, sorry DB that gave up the most yards per game was 31 yards per game. That's cornerback one. That's Pro Bowl, all pro type of numbers, and that was the worst of Sauce Gardner, Michael Carter, and DJ Reed. Was DJ Reed at that number? It is phenomenal. This sounds like a big suck-off fest, but it really is like how good that Jets defense is on all three. And they're, you mentioned that Cleveland, like they're just not reliant on one group more than the other. They work so well together. Yeah. They're so well coached too by Jeff Ulbrich. Like when you watch them on film, it's like, okay, that might be open. And then the way they're just able to because closed space and zone is beautiful, right? And it's why like when people will say, oh, Sauce Gardner doesn't follow wide receiver one. It's like, that's awesome. Guess what? Guess what makes the defense run? The fucking way that they run it, because they master it and they just it makes it so hard to pass against them because you have these traditional reads as a quarterback of like, all right, if that corner does this, you go this way, you throw the ball. And you read those keys and you're thinking, okay, this is what I'm throwing, and they just close in on it. So where if it's not going to be a turnover, obviously, but they just are able to get those pass breakups. And then, I know you love Jordan Whitehead, and so do I, but I think Tony Adams and Chuck Clark is a fine safety duo. Yeah,
for sure. Do you want to go through their draft class kind of quick? I feel like we've been recording this for a long time.
Yeah, we basically did their additions and losses already. I'll just go quick. Yeah, you know what? We did. We basically hit on every addition and loss. Yeah, lost Bryce Huff, John Franklin Myers, Jordan Whitehead, C.J. Uzomah, Zach Wilson. Draft class: Olu Fashanu, Malachi Corley, the wide receiver Braylon Allen, running back out of Wisconsin, who I think is going to get a good amount of playing time for them. Jordan Travis, FSU QB, he's on ice. Isaiah Davis, South Dakota State running back. Funny story, punched Dallas Goedert, Quantez Stiggers, and then my favorite, Jalen Key, Mr. Irrelevant, Jalen Key, safety Alabama. Jalen Key, safety Alabama. Jalen Key, safety Alabama. Who asked me? Who are the last five Mr. Irrelevants?
Who are the last five Mr. Irrelevants?
Jalen Key, safety Alabama. Desjuan Johnson, D-line out of Toledo. Brock Purdy, quarterback out of Iowa State. Grant Stewart, linebacker out of Houston. And then Tay Crowder, linebacker out of Georgia.
Wow. Look at that.
Anyways, this is the first Jets draft class I don't love in a while.
Okay.
I don't think Malachi Corley. I think Malachi Corley is great in theory, but in reality, he's just not a good route runner, and is unreliable.
He's a yak guy in an offense that isn't going to give you a lot of yak.
And it's especially with Aaron Rodgers. Like if you put him on the Chiefs or whatever team that like gets a lot of space and isn't super reliant on timing and trust, I just don't think he's a great fit for this. Allen, I think, is going to be a good running back too. Jordan Travis, one, I don't think he's good either, but he's not gonna. He's dealing with major injury, and then Stiggers and Key. I'm actually not super familiar with those guys, but I'm looking at that day one, beginning of day one, day two, and beginning of day three.
It seems like they like Isaiah Davis.
Obviously, I love the Olu pick.
We love the Olu pick. I think Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis are going to get some run. I don't love Braylon Allen as a running back. He is more of like an old school running back, even though I say old school, but he's still super, super young.
He's a good fit with Breece Hall, though.
He's big. He's a big dude, man.
He's cut up, too.
So, yeah, we'll see.
And part of that is I've loved the Jets draft classes outside of Zach Wilson in the last few years. But
they only had 2 top 100 picks. So, and then their fourth round pick was the 134th pick. So it's tough to have any major takeaways.
It's basically the Malachi Corley pick and Jordan Travis.
Yeah.
But anyways, X factor. Mine was Xavier Gibson, the slot wide receiver. What was yours?
Tyron Smith. If Tyron Smith is out there, even if he's out there for 13 games, Bobby, and he's playing like an all-pro, like Tyron Smith was fucking back last year, and he played like an all-pro. He still missed some games, but it was only some, and it wasn't all or most. Yeah. So if he can be an all-pro player for the Jets, a left tackle, second most valuable position in the game of football, plus you have a healthy Aaron Rodgers too. Tyron Smith is my X factor for sure. I think he can help take the Jets offense to places it hasn't been in a long time, arguably ever.
Over under 9.5 wins.
Now this is, I know I kind of want to go through quick with this, but these were actually my first notes. The Jets fans are obviously huge fans of the Jets, and they're rooting for the Jets this year. You want to know who else is rooting for the Jets this year?
Who?
The National Football League. The National Football League is
all prime time.
Is rooting for the Jets this year. where they gave them a primetime game week 1 against 49ers, which, hey, in my opinion, like Christian McCaffrey is struggling with that calf strain right now. Brandon Ayuk may or may not be traded as of August 15th when we're filming this. I may be picking the Jets to win that game, which is kind of crazy. But
I'll be picking the 49ers.
Jets schedule weeks 1 through 5 is by far the easiest in the NFL because then after you have the
Titans, Patriots, Broncos, and Vikings.
Yes, I mean it's very, very easy. And then they play the Bills week 6. Oh wait, it's a primetime game. Then they play the Steelers week 7. Oh wait, it's a primetime game. And then you go forward 2 weeks, week 9 against the Texans. Oh wait, it's a primetime game. You can go literally look at their schedule. It's kind of freaking crazy.
And then once the flex schedule starts, it's all 1 o'clock. So
Right,
they're like,
right.
all right, we'll flex you if you're not dead by then.
Yeah, so the VP of NFL broadcasting, Mike North, said this about the Jets. We feel like the Jets kind of owe us one. We had this conversation a year ago. All of us were in on the Jets. For Rodgers to last 4 plays was disheartening for many of us. And he actually went on, and I'm not going to read all the quotes, but he actually went on in some other quotes being like, we kind of set it up where we may even flex the Jets later in the year, where they kind of, last year they didn't, I think they kind of closed the door on, we kind of can't flex the Jets out of these spots because we have them in all these primetime games. So, yeah, you kind of have to take your medicine and watch Zach Wilson or whatever the quarterback they ran out towards the latter part of the year, right? But they made sure that they set them up in an opportunity where they could go 4-1 or 5-0 before a huge primetime TV stretch, right? Where you have the Bills, the Steelers, the Texans, the Colts from week 6 to week 11. So they could be good, 4-1 or 5-0, based off depending on what they do against 49ers. And then even at the end of the season, they have all these 1 o'clock games that they want to put in primetime. The NFL, they are fans of the New York Jets this year, and I am going over. What was your win? 9.5?
Yeah, it's over.
Over.
I mean, I remember when the schedule came out and I follow some Jets people and I'm like, this is brutal. And then you said
brutal.
on our schedule, it's like one of the easiest. I was like, is it? And I just realized, it's just prime time. It's brutal if you're covering the team.
Yes.
And that's why those people were complaining. But just like opponent-wise, it's one of the easiest in the NFL. So I'm going over. I think that was our longest TPP by far.
That was our longest TPP by far.
It's because we've spent so much time talking about the Jets this year, bad and mostly good offseason, that it's just like I feel like I know this team better than any team. And
now again,
we also are in the New York market.
Again, I want to put an asterisk by this because I'm sure there's a lot of comments that, probably if you're that mad about what we had to say, you're probably not listening at this point.
No, you're just saying, well, the Jets find a way to screw up, but we can't analyze like, the Jets are always something's gonna happen.
Right. Now, I can very much say, because I picked last year, Bobby, I was the opposite of what I am right now. I was like, this is going to go wrong.
Oh, I agreed because I didn't like the additions that they had outside of Rodgers.
Right.
You knew the defense was going to be good. You didn't like, and again, I still don't like that. This is how long the TPPs went. The lights went off.
No, but really, like at this point, hey, if you just want to sit there and you're going to be like, you guys are fucking idiots because you guys are high in the Jets and stuff will go wrong. I also can't sit there and disagree with you.
We can't predict everything going wrong.
I'm not going to,
because of the name on the jersey.
Right. But also they do have hurt. They have guys that are hurt and they get hurt a lot.
Sure. I think they did a good job protecting themselves against that.
Yep.
All right, that's a team that is the New York Jets, and this is Football Today.